Good day, guys. I just was trying to keep up with the COVID stuff. We're going to try to shoot some videos, and today we're going to talk about natural edge bowls. Got several of them here that you can kind of look at and talk about. When I first started turning, the natural edges were pretty nice to do. This is one that was made by a mentor of mine, Bill Porterfield, and it's silky lace, and it's kind of got a 70s look or so, you know. It's tall and skinny. And the problem with that was I was proud of it. I paid $75 to get it, and then I got knocked off at the fireplace and knocked some holes in it, but still, it's whose it was, all right? And this one over here is by one of our club members. Made it, and I think it's Russian olive, and it did have a bark left on it, but the bark has come off of it, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I love the way the shape is. It's kind of all about the shape when it comes to this natural edge stuff. It's the rim that you look at and what it looks like. Our friend Tom just made this one the other day. It's a piece of Bradford pear. He's got a pretty nice finish going on here. I think he's used that Wilshire grit, sanding sealer, and maybe a little bit of wax. Is using some of the wax things. But anyway, nice piece of Bradford pear. And it was some of that wood that the ice storm destroyed, and we got from the ice storm. This is a piece of pecan that's been around for a while, and this one is its brother. And they kind of lived in a tree straight up and down on top of each other, so we just sliced them off, all right? And they're finished, and we've left the pith in the center of it. So if you leave the pith in there, things happen. He's put some CA glue and tried to stop it from cracking, but it's still got some minor cracks going back to the pith. And if you set it down on the table now, you can see it kind of rock and roll a little bit. So that's because it has warped, and it's no longer flat on the bottom. This one was one that he did first, and he's tried to turn it super thin, and he actually succeeded, but in the process there was a hole cut in the bottom of it. And when he tried to save it, what he did was he took a piece of walnut, and a solid piece of walnut, and just made a little base for it and set it up on the base. And the bark has stayed on it really, really good, and I was kind of surprised about that. But it was the dead of winter. I mean, we're talking maybe the 8th or the 9th or the 10th of January. There's ice on the ground, there's ice on this tree when we cut it down. But if you cut a tree down in the very dead of winter, when the sap is pretty much down in the root system, chances are that the bark will stay on it better, all right? Won't say it'll be there forever. When I first started turning, I was trying to figure out how to hold the tools and all that, and one of my friends told me we need to go out to take a 7-day class at Craft Supply. So I did that. Went out to Provo, Utah, and I took a class out there. This was a piece of aspen, and it was cut in the middle of the winter also. There was snow on that top of that mountain when we were going up there to cut it down, and it was wet and green, but it grew in a tree like this, all right, up and down. And the bark has stayed on really fine. What I don't like about it is the type of oil finish that we put on it. It was supposed to have been a temporary thing to put it on there, and then it was supposed to come home and sand it off, but you never get back to that kind of stuff. Once you finish it, it's done. But aspen should have been a really light white color with maybe some tinges of green, but it's turned out almost OSU orange. This one is a piece of oak that my friend Bill Porterfield also did, and it's got shape around the top, and I like that. And again, this was probably done in the summertime because the bark is totally gone off of it now. But he's got some things going on. It's got some grubs and stuff going in, and worms, holes, and it's just pretty. You know, oak is really pretty wood, but sometimes it's open grain and it's hard to work with. We had a guy come and do a demonstration on open edge bowls, and in the Oklahoma City Club one time, and he did this little chip and dip thing with a natural edge around the chip and dip, both of them. And it pretty much has just got a spray lacquer finish on it. And I don't even remember what kind of wood that was. It was probably Bradford pear or something. A lot of Bradford pear trees gets killed in the wintertime, if you notice that. But then there's some others going on. These are natural edge burls, all right? So this is a piece of a big leaf maple burl, and it's got a big old inclusion in the side of it. And this was one that Dale Nish had taught me how to do when we were out at Craft Supply. And I really kind of liked that. But his thing was, if you got the pretty part of the wood up here, don't necessarily go in there and cut all of it away and wind up with just a bowl with no natural edge. He said if you got something really pretty, go ahead and leave it a little thick on the top so you can see your detail of it. And I took him at his word, and this one here is the same big leaf maple burl, but I've left in a lot of those little needles sticking up. Didn't cut any of them off. And I put it up there and kind of made a little miniature lamp out of it. Of course, it's not a lamp, it just looks like a lamp. But these are all kind of natural edge bowls. I've saved this one until last, and this will be our project I think that we're going to work out today. This one has no finish on it. I just did this to see if I could still remember how to do this kind of stuff. But I'd like this one several times. Don Roediger down at the Oklahoma City Club did one, and I like the diamond on the side. It's clean on the bottom and clean on the top. I kind of like that. So we'll go ahead now and move over and pick out a piece of wood to make this out of. So the other day we had a major ice storm come through here, and we lost a lot of trees. And as I said earlier, Bradford pears is one of them that just falls apart in the ice storm. So my friend Jerry has saved 3 logs here for us to pick one out to demonstrate today. And I think this was right there in Enid somewhere. But anyway, we looked at the logs. He got them, and he did what he should have done. He seals the end of it. And you can seal the end with some commercial stuff, Anchor Seals, one of the brands, and there's 2 or 3 others like that. Just a good latex paint. Anything to stop the sap from running out quick. If you lose that water in the log out fast, you're going to get some cracks. And I have lost lots of good lumber because of cracking up. So if you can find something to seal it with, that's good. And this particular one has kind of got a fork going on in it, and there is a version of this natural edge stuff where they take a fork like this and make a heart-shaped bowl out of, which is kind of cool, but we're not going to do that today. This one is a nice piece. You can look around. This is nice and clean. I kind of like the idea that it's got a clean shank in the middle of it here. You could pick a piece like this one that's got a limb sticking out, and you could turn that up and maybe have a knot hole in the top of your project, you know, a piece of knot showing. It's got a little bit of curvature to it, and it's got a knot on one end where it's kind of just been cut off a little bit, so it would wind up making a shorter bowl, all right, a shorter, fatter bowl. And then this one here is a pretty nice piece too. It's got a nice flat section on it that we can make the bottom or the top out of, and I kind of like this piece, so I think maybe we'll make a project out of that. I'm going to take it over here to the bandsaw, and we'll cut it square. Alright, so I'm going to start out on this other end. Cut this big knot off to start out with. Get it kind of where it lays flat. And I've got a little miter here in the saw. And when you're at your saw, you don't want to have it too high, so we're going to run it down a little bit. Maybe an inch or so, just so it clears. And you need to be able to grab this wood and run it through so it doesn't roll as it's going through. That's the voice of experience talking, because it can catch it and it can kick it back at you and you can bleed a little bit, all right? So we don't want to do that, all right? So I'm going to do a good hose on it. Important that you have a nice square end on it, but we don't want any cracks in it. So this piece of wood is still really green, and it's got a lot of moisture in it, which is all the things we want. All right, I'm going to cut this other end off. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 inches diameter. Fairly flat on one side and fairly straight. So I think we'll stop at this point and we'll set up and we'll proceed to work on this piece of wood. Okay, we're back over here to this little workbench and we're going to look at this log and decide how we want to mount it. So it has a perfectly flat, even a little flatter edge right there. That would be a good place for either the top or the bottom, and it would help me keep it square in the process. So I could come up here if I needed to, and I could take a wood chisel and I could knock off some knots and stuff, but this one didn't really require it. So I think we're going to make this the bottom of the project, and then this flat spot over here will be the top of the project. So I'm going to set it down at the top of it. And then we need to, this will be the bottom. So I'm getting confused here. But I'm going to turn the top up. We're going to take a ruler. I need to pause just a second. So now I've got my ruler out here now. I'm going to find the exact center of this project. And it looks like I'm about 12 1/4 long, so about 6 1/8. And I'm just going to kind of mark it here a bit with my little chisel where I want that center to be. Now, we're going to talk about screw chucks, and we're going to put this on a screw chuck. Several different kinds of screw chucks. So if when you buy a chuck, you usually get a screw that comes with it. This is what most people will use. If you're going to do very much of this kind of stuff where you use a screw, you can take a screw that comes with your chuck and you can put it in a wooden fixture and make it stick through just so far that you want it, maybe an inch or whatever it is. And then you can put a faceplate on here and dedicate it, and you can have a screw chuck. So this is a homemade job. This one here is one that's a factory-made job that I got for my big lathe, and I oftentimes use it. So it doesn't matter which one you use, you just need to prepare the wood the same way on all of them. So I think we're going to use the one that comes with the chuck and on here. So we can put this temporarily in the chuck. And it has my particular chuck has just a round shank here that the jaws, on the inside of the jaws, there's those little arms that the jaws screw to. It goes in there and comes up on that round piece. And then the jaws themselves will clamp down and it won't be able to pull out. So we come in here and we screw it down, pull it out like we want it, and then clamp it tight. And then we know how far it needs to come out. So this particular one here is 1.5 inches, all right? We need to drill the hole at least 1.5 inches. So you could take your drill bit and put a piece of tape or something around it so that you knew where the 1.5 inches was. And come back over here, and it's really critical that you get this straight up and down when you drill that hole in the middle of this guy. And that should be more than enough. And you always want to go more than enough so that your screw doesn't bottom out in the bottom. But if that screw bottoms out in the bottom of the hole, as you're twisting and tightening, you're going to strip the threads. All right. So we don't want to strip those threads in this wood. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is what size drill bit. I should have talked about that first, but you need to figure out what size drill bit you need. So you can take your screw. Let me get another one here. You can take your screw, and it's got a solid shank in the center of it, and then the threads stick out past that. So if you just lay that on here and you lay your drill bit across it, and when the drill bit covers up the center of that, and you don't see that center shank, and all you see is threads on each side, you've got the right size drill bit. If you go too big, of course your threads are going to strip out too easily, and if it's too small, you're going to strip them out just trying to put it in. So you got to have the right size drill bit to do this. So I think we'll pause here, and I will proceed to put it on the lathe. So we're back over here at the lathe and ready to start doing this, and I'm going to screw this piece of wood on here. So I'm lucky, I have a nice flat level spot. If I happen to have a piece of bark or something that would throw me off the center, I'd have to take a wood chisel and clean that off a little bit. But we're lucky here, so I can just kind of come in here and proceed to screw this screw in. Sometimes it gets up there about so far and it'll get tight, then I'll lock the headstock when that happens. Like right now, we'll just lock the headstock down where I can continue to screw it on. It's a good idea to keep it pushing in as you screw it onto the screw. This is a nice long screw. It's 1.25 inches or so, or 1.5 inches maybe, down into the wood, so I really have a lot of faith in it not wanting to come off. Sometimes if you screw is too short, you have a little bit of a difficulty getting it to come off. Make sure that I don't think I got that screw real tight there. Okay, so I'm on there pretty good and solid. Then I'm going to pull this tool rest over, and I can kind of see a distance between my tool rest and my wood, and I want to see that's hitting just a little bit. So I'm off just ever so slightly, but I think it's just fine. If it's off too much, you'll want to take a little bit of time and see if you can level it out with maybe a shim or something in there. So I think we're going to pause here just a second, and we'll get ready to turn it. So we probably should talk a little bit about safety. This is a big chunk of wood, and we're going to play airplane with it there for a little while. And there's been people really hurt bad with this, so don't take anything for granted. Always get your face shield on. Make sure you've done as good a job as you can putting it on here. You're going to have a lot of bark flying off of here for a little while, so you need to protect yourself. You get a jacket or whatever on. I've got my favorite apron on here, and you always start out with the lathe turned down pretty slow, and then as you get a little speed come up on it, you can bring the speed up a little bit. Now the wood is not balanced, all right, but I'm playing with a piece of wood here that's a little bit out of balance. You guys may have a smaller lathe than this, and what you want to do is you want to come up with your speed until you feel vibration. Alright, now this one is not going to bounce around, I'll tell you that right now. The whole lathe here, it weighs 1,000 pounds, and this is probably not going to bounce around too much on this one. So you can kind of see the center, and you'd like to turn this as fast as you can turn safely. and I'll qualify that, I can feel a little vibration coming in that. But as fast as you can, and keep your lane from walking across the floor or whatever. You don't want it vibrating too much. Sometimes things that are out of balance, like a tire on a wheel, you can get a tire out of balance, and you can get it up there and it bounces pretty good, but you go up just a little bit faster and it kind of smooths out. I know all of you experienced that. So the same way with the lane. If it gets out of balance a little bit, you may speed it up just a little bit and get rid of that vibration problem. So we're going to position our bowl gouge, which is my favorite tool, half-inch bowl gouge. And when I first started turning, I asked the instructor, well, if you could only afford one tool, what would you buy? He said, buy a half-inch bowl gouge. So you can see now we're going to do this entire project with pretty much with just a bowl gouge. We'll use a couple of other tools a little bit here and there. I'm going to start out in the center and drill a little hole. Now, this is the base of it we're going to be doing. So I'm just going to kind of do some pull cuts across here. And when I hold that bowl gouge, I hold it where you can see the flute on the top, put it at the 10 o'clock or the 2 o'clock position. That would be the way that you should hold it. And then you just grab a hold of it and come down. So now I can turn it over this way, and I can do a push cut across, and turn it this way, do a pull cut. So we're going to do a pull cut. And I'm just interested here in seeing this one at the bottom. As I go to turning, we're just slowly into balance. So I'll make another pass here. Then I'm probably going to want to stop and move my tool rest in. You don't want to be turning with your tool rest too far away. You kind of lose leverage on your tool. Make it just a little bit high. And I'm going to continue turning, pulling that across like that until when the center of that becomes big enough that I can make a base out of it, I'm going to quit. So you can see that I'm still not quite big enough here for the base to be. This is going to be the bottom of it. So we're going to cut it down and flatten that out, and then I'll put a mortise down in here that I can use my chuck to chuck into. So a little bit more. A lot of chips come off of this. Those cowboy hats. Man, it's good. I do enjoy turning wet wood because you can get some big old chips that come flying off there. You can haul it out pretty quick. That's part of my problem is when I get on wet wood, I want to go too fast.
When you get your mask down, speak up louder.
Okay. All right, here we go again. I'm going to continue with that just a little bit more. There's a little bit of a knot right in here that I want to get under, get rid of it. So I believe we're just about there. I probably made a mistake in picking the knot hole to be the base, but I would like to get it a little bit more. I'm kind of out of shape a little bit here, so I'm going to think I'm going to go down just maybe a couple of more passes with it. So, Tom, will you hand me that other project over there?
So Dwayne, while Tom's getting that, would this part you're doing this very moment be suitable for someone doing it with what are called easy wood tools?
Yeah, I think so. I think your tool is your choice. I prefer the traditional tools, but a lot of people don't even have those. So yeah, you could use an easy wood or a scraper type tool and do it. It would probably take you twice as long. All right. So what we're creating here is we're going to create the little mortise here that my chuck can go into and clamp out. All right. And I think I'm just about big enough to do that. Maybe one more pass. I could probably do it right here, but we're going to take one or two more passes, and then we'll make that mortise. So you see me doing some pull cuts across here to get my primary shape, and then I turn around and I did a push cut. If you're doing a push cut, you should ride that bevel. If you ride the bevel, you get a smoother, cleaner cut. Out here, I was not riding the bevel when I was doing those pull cuts. You can see how rough that is. But if you ride your bevel and you clean that up, we'll get a nice smooth spot to sit on. Now then, we're going to create a mortise. And your chuck determines how big that mortise should be. And I didn't do it, and I've already got it on the screw. But you can take that chuck and you can close it up and then open it up where there's about 1/8 inch between the jaws. And then it should make pretty much a circle. And then you can measure the outside diameter of that, and that's how big you want to make this. I have done this so many times with this chuck that I know about anywhere between 1 3/4 and 2 inches is the proper size. All right? So we're going to kind of mark this off a little bit to what I think the 2 inch mark would be. So I'll put 3, and I'll put one where I thought it was going to be, and then one inside and one outside of that. And then we can measure and see which one of those 3 lines is closer to my 1 3/4 or 2 inch. So if I do that first original mark, it's going to be exactly right. All right? Because that's where I thought it would be. And then I put one inside and one out. It kind of helps me on doing that. So to cut a mortise, you kind of watch it. I'm going to ride the bevel on that line that I want. I'm going to bring it around and open it up a little bit, get a cut going, and take that across. Then I'm going to turn around and get in the middle of it, still riding the bevel, and I'm going to bring it back across. This is still a push cut. I'm just pushing it from the wrong side. And I think if we cut this no less than 1/4 inch deep, since it's wet wood, we have a tendency sometimes to break the bottom of them out. Okay, let's pause it just a second. So I went over and got my skew, and I'm going to use a dovetail chuck jaws, all right? And which means that the jaws themselves have got about a 7-degree taper on them. So if I take a skew and set that skew up here on my line, and then just push that straight in, I can create a nice little mortise up in there that has a dovetail shape on it. So I've got a mortise cut here, and I'm gonna go ahead and clean it up. It's got a little, as wet wood does sometimes, it tearing out a little bit, but I'm gonna clean that up with my skew, and then I'll bring the tailstock up and put it in here just to support it, to make sure it doesn't do something weird and get off center. And clean that area up. Kind of important that you get this done, because this will actually be the bottom of your project where it will sit on the table. Kind of like that. One more pass with my skew to cut it good and square, and then we'll be done with this part. I'll have to raise the tool rest up just a bit. So what is important about this cut and this mortise? It's important that you have a nice smooth spot where it can sit on the ground. And you can see that here I might need to take another pass or two because my bark is really close to the outside of where the foot is. So if I'm not careful, this bark is going to be exposed. So I may need to take it down another pass and then put another tenon in it. Could just leave it like that and have a little barky spot on here. I don't think it's going to matter. So I think we'll just leave it today. But it's important that you have a good dovetail. It has to be smooth and straight down on the inside down here so that the chuck can have a place to seat. I kind of like that, all right? I think I'm going to bring my tailstock up now and proceed to cut the outside of it off a little bit. Can we still get a good shot of that? We're still looking all right here.
Yes, do you want me to zoom in?
No,
Okay.
I'm gonna be working on this side. If we need to move the camera, you can pause it and come over, but,
No, we're good.
okay, we're good. Okay. So, kind of move trying to block the wood, make sure it's not gonna hit my tool rest before we start. Now, I'm just gonna be working on this outside 6 inches right here for a minute. To you about what I am doing here, as I've angled my tool rest just a little bit, and I want that so that as I cut this, I get this shape right here, which is going to form a diamond out of the bark. All right, so I'm going to have to kind of keep it going here, and I'll continue to cut it until I get about the center of this. All right? Fairly straight. It can be a little bit concave and still look nice. And we probably have a little concave to it. So I brought the tool rest, or the live center up so that it's just giving me some support. I don't want it to get knocked off of center as I go to cutting all this outside of this wing, because if it gets knocked off center, then my mortise is not going to run chuck up straight, and I'll have problems whenever I get to the other side. So I'm kind of liking that. I'm not quite to the center here yet, but I'm getting awful close to where I want to be. I think I'm going to work this foot over just a little bit right in here, see if I can get rid of some of that bark inclusion right there. It won't hurt if it's on there. Might even look good. So when I reverse it here, I'm still thinking ahead all the time. But when I reverse it, I'll put in here and I'll go to squeezing my jaws open so that it will grab inside of this mortise. If I don't have enough surface between here and here, I'm going to break this out, all right? To cure that, I just leave a little extra thickness in here, maybe like I got 3/4 of an inch, or I could take that mortise deeper. If that mortise is deeper than this surface right here, then I can chuck out down in there and I've got a good solid base to chuck out on. So that's kind of an important deal, because I've seen a lot of people just over clamp those and break this out. If you get the smallest little catch, it's going to break out. So there's lots of things that can cause it to break out, not just you, but a little catch can do that also.
Now,
So,
Dwayne, let me ask a question. Instead of having the mortise going in, could you leave it with like a cylinder sticking out and clamp in, and then you wouldn't have any problem with it breaking?
well, no, it actually breaks more easier that way. Because this is wet wood and the grain will break off. If you just got a spigot sticking out here, it's going to break pretty easy, all right? Because it's wet wood and not real dry and not very tough, all right? Okay, so on to this. I think we're pretty good there. I'm going to go now and move my tool rest out, and we're going to work the end of this over just a little bit. So I'll be cutting the 4 corners off of this as it comes around. We're going to kind of round it up and get it a little bit more in balance. And again, you got a little bitty teeny bit of wood 4 times. All right, then you got a bunch of air. So you're more cutting it more air. So we're going to kind of do what we call float the bevel. You won't be able to ride it because too much air. And then the tool will be doing this. So I get a good anchor, and I'm just barely going to nip the corners on it. And I want my speed up pretty good right here. And you can almost see the ghost of where the end of that is. I think we're going to pause just a second and move the camera. I want you to be able to see what I'm calling the ghost. So we've repositioned the camera, and I want you to be able to possibly see what I'm calling the ghost. Can you see it over on this side? Probably better than you can where I was cutting. But you can see wood, no wood, wood, no wood. Kind of looks like it's fluttering a little bit. So as I begin to cut across that, I don't want to take too much wood at one time. I want to just kind of speed up on it a little bit. Take some little baby steps here, about an 18 minutes or so at a time. And I'm going to stop it. Take one more cut here and then we'll look at it. Take a cut all the way across here. This should make the outside of those wings kind of rounded. You can see how it kind of rounded over here now. And I can better see where my center line wants to be, and I've got it more in balance because my wood's not off-centered a little bit. If it's even an 1/8 of an inch, you can still see the saw marks over here, but they're gone here, so it's still off a little bit. I may I may take another pass while we're still in this position and clean it up a little bit better. You can hear it. Wood, no wood, wood, no wood. You hear it kind of bouncing around. Now, if I went off of that, I stand a real good chance of tearing the bark off of it. So you can see that little edge of bark sticking up. I'm going to turn around and come back the other direction and push it back so that the bark will stay on there. Okay? That looks pretty good. Can you see this little bit of tear out right here? So where the tool is coming across this way, and as it exits the wood, it wants to rip and tear. So to make that less noticeable, you have to have higher RPMs and a good sharp tool. Okay? So that's not real bad. I've seen them a lot worse than that. But just mention that that's probably going to happen. Now I'm going to get back over here and we're going to turn this side. So we'll pause it just a second and remove the camera. So we're going to start turning a little bit more. You can begin to see the diamond shape coming in this bark on both sides. Here's that little bark inclusion I was telling you might still be there when we get through, and I'm pretty sure it will be, but I don't think it'll be anything except just more wood to look at. We're doing this as a natural edge, so let's see the natural edge is my idea on this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a couple of more passes. You can see that I'm kind of ripping and tearing right through here. I'm probably going to do some push cuts, kind of clean that up a little bit so that it's not so rough. As I'm turning, you can hear it thump, 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 thump. That's that wood catching the tool as it comes around. Look at that, see what it looks like. I think it's just about pretty good. Pretty good. We'll take one more pass. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. So I think we're going to probably make that mortise a little deeper. I think it needs to be a little deeper before we take it off, so I'm going to move this out of the way. I've got it in there about 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to take it down to where it's a full quarter deep. Too high with my tool rest. You can kind of see it off center just a little bit. I like to center it up on this center with my chuck. Yeah, I kinda like that, so I think we'll pause it and we'll turn it around, and then we'll start making the top. So I have reversed this now, and we're gonna start out doing the same thing we did on the other side. I'm gonna take a couple of passes across here, there's a big old knot here, and kind of level all this stuff out. I can position my tool rest so that I can get in that hole where the screw was, and that'll give me a starting place to make my pull cuts. Here we go. If you're going to break it and tear it up, this is usually where it happens. If we did cut that pin but about a quarter of an inch deep, and we were having a discussion while the camera was off, it might have been safer or better if we made that pin and even down to 3/8 of an inch or deeper. So just for your information, I think that you should do that. I kind of like seeing even no tinning is okay with me. And we may make a no tinning deal in a minute. So, at this point, I've got to decide if I want to leave that natural edge wood right here around the lip or not. So I'm going to play like I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to cut straight in here and pull out for a few times. Then we'll kind of look at that and decide if we like that or not. Okay? So we're going to cut straight in. There's a good load of draw cut up here. Pull cut. And I was just show you a little bit about that bark, what I'm talking about, but you can begin to see as that tool exits, it gets rough right in here. And I wouldn't be surprised if I go to pulling a little bit of bark off right there. But I'm going to take it on down. Mostly out here I'll reposition my angle a little bit so that I can just kind of follow. I use my hand and use it as a guide on this tool. And that way, if I've got that at a little bit of an angle, I can cut from up here to bust up here. I'm just going to get out here on the end. Take maybe a 3/4 of an inch more than I do back up in here. Reposition my tool rest at this time, but you can begin to see, can you see this diamond coming in on the sides here? So if I take this down a little bit more, we open wood up all the way around, that diamond will leave kind of like it is on this side, that diamond will look better. And if I'm looking straight down on it, I can see that that diamond's still out of proportion. We'll look at it again. You can begin to see what that would look like if I just had a 1/4 inch of bark around here for the top. Then there would be a wooden, clean wood place right through here, and my diamond would begin to come in there. So I'm going to work this outside edge over a little bit more. Then we'll go back and see what that would look like. Looking pretty good. So, on my prototype here, I've cut the bark off of it. And I've just made a nice little top on it. So we have to decide whether we want to leave the natural edge on here or to cut it off. I think I'll hollow a little bit and then make my mind up. All right? Since I want to keep this bark for a minute, we'll get a timeout. Okay, we're going to take a pause just a second. So I have positioned my tool rest so that I'm kind of in the center of the project. To keep that bark from flying off of there whenever I make this cut, I'm going to start out here on the outside edge, cut straight in, and then get under the bark and go this way. If I come out, chances are I'll tear that little bit of bark off. So I'm going to set up out here. And make a cut. And we can kind of see what it might look like. Vote, guys, bark or no bark?
I like the bark.
You like the bark? Yeah, we can leave it on there for a little while. So, Tom and I did have a good friend passed away this summer, Bob Jarrett, and Bob said, when he was kind of mentoring me a little bit, he says, you make your cut, and then the next one is just a memory of what you've done. So as you cut here, you begin to get muscle memory on what you were doing, and you get better every cut, and that will help you on your hollowing. So, and he was right, a little bit high. So set up, make a cut. And I have to go down, I've committed myself to 1.5 inches depth, at least, because that's what I drilled that hole. So I could just continue to do that kind of a cut until I reach my 1.5 inches.
And the reason for that is you're trying to eliminate the hole showing, correct?
Yes, yes. We don't want that hole showing. So, this time, you can watch, but I'm going to make a cut. And I'm going to bring my handle down, cut up, heel, and then back down toward the hole. Alright, you see what I did? Do it one more time. Start at my bottom, I'm going to bring my handle down. That positions my tool above center, and then I'm going to bring the handle back up so that I come back toward the center. And by doing that, I can stay on my bevel a lot longer, which gives me a cleaner, smoother cut on the inside. So, I'm kind of liking that. I might make that a little, do you think narrower? A little less bark? What do you think? Yeah? Yeah, let's make it through. Here we go. Still down in there a ways. stop it and clean it up just a little bit. So I'm still about a 1/4 inch away from being deep enough. But I'd like to get my depth here about right. Running out of tool rest. So you seen me move that tool rest out there because I told you I was running out. It's kind of a safety deal. I've got a friend, and I won't call him by name, but Ron Eads could tell you who he is, that slipped off the edge of a tool rest, damaged his hand, several stitches, a month's worth of not having any shop time before he could get back, and that's why you move your tool rest out, all right? So Ron, you can tell him who it is if you want to. So anyway, we've just about got the hole out, and I'm still pretty thick in here. It's time for hollowing, and you can hollow so much with a bow gouge, and then you got to give up and get some other tool. So my favorite tool to begin the hollowing is round nose scrapers, and I got one here that's totally round nosed and one that's partially round nosed. But it depends on how deep I'm going back up in there. If I'm going over too far, then I get so much vibration with my tool it doesn't hollow well. But it does do a pretty good job. We'll get started with this one on the sides probably, and then move to the big round nose on the bottom. I have created the top on this to look like kind of like a little stove pipe, except it's cone shaped up. So I need to follow that same curve here on the inside down a little way, get my thickness down to where it's around a 1/4 inch thick, all right? Then we'll worry about the bottom.
So Dwayne, the tool you're using now would be quite similar to a carbide
Yes,
scraper,
round, right.
like one of the
Round one.
easy wood tools.
The round one, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you're rougher. So let's pause it just a second. So we've positioned the camera where hopefully you can begin to see that I've hollowed out a little bit here. I've got an angle set up here on the outside going in, and this angle on the inside needs to kind of mimic it just a little bit. If you run out of tool to where you can't get back up in there far enough with a round nose scraper, this would be a good place for one of your Mike Hunter type tools, all right? This is one I've had for quite a while, and we had him out to do a demonstration for us. I think maybe we should work on getting him back one of these days. This tool works level, handle level, and we're going to get up in there, and it will allow me to get back in here a little bit farther for a little bit more of a cut. So, stop it here and clean it up a little bit. So we were using this little hunter tool, and it's got a little bitty cutter on it, not very big at all, and it's pretty aggressive. So as I'm going up in here, it tends to dig in a little bit, which is a downfall of this tool. He has some that's got twice as big a cutters on them, and they are much, much smoother. You would think that the big ones would be more aggressive, but it's backwards to that. The little ones are a lot more aggressive than what the big ones are. So with that in mind, I now have it kind of hollowed out a little bit back up in here, and my depth is almost where I want it. I'm going to go ahead and clean it up with just the round nose scrapers. Start out with this bigger one. So I think I need to talk about round nose scrapers before we go much further. Scrapers, and it doesn't matter whether it's round nosed or square nosed or what, need to work handle high. All right? If you've got that handle level on a traditionally ground scraper, you're going to get a nasty catch. And you're going to pull your wood off the lathe, and you're going to be hollering ouch, and you visit your friendly doctor. All right? So to eliminate all of those catches and to be able to use this tool handle level, you put a small reverse grind. Can you see that little reverse grind I got on top of that?
Probably it's not going to show very well.
That's right. But you put a little reverse grind on top of that, and that is about the same angle as what you would raise your handle up. That eliminates the need to raise your handle. And I guarantee you, you can do that, and your catches just disappear. They're just pretty much all gone. So I like doing that. I like a little bit around the sides, and then we'll camera just a second. So we've repositioned the camera just a little bit. We wanted you to be able to see these diamond-shaped bark on the sides, and you can see it's not a perfect shape. So I'm going to trim a little bit more off of this side, make this deeper just a little bit, and create a better looking diamond. Then we're going to soften the corners on these edges of the bowl. So first things first, and we're going to clean up a little bit off the sides. Real tempting to get too aggressive right there. So I'm making a quick step in. Quick step is probably my favorite step, but I like the results that I get from it. There's a whole lot less clear out, lots cleaner, and overall better looking.
Let me pause here just a second. Okay.
So hopefully I made a decent cut. I've got some tear out, but I'm fixing to sand it and clean it up. And my diamond shape is looking a lot better. So now that I'm going to soften the corners on this project a little bit. And we'll do that with a round nose scraper. So as I'm turning, can you see me here? As I'm turning, I'm watching this top edge up here. My eyes just go away from my tool because I can't see anything down there anyway. And visibly looking at the top of this so that I can see better my shape. And right now I've got a pretty nice little shape. I need to take a little bit more off the inside edge to make it more rounded. Can you see the looks pretty good. So you see I've got a little bit of tear out on the bark as it exits the tool, and the same way over here to get a little fuzz. We're going to take care of that with a sander. And I think I'm about ready to start kind of cleaning up and sanding a little bit. So I will pause just a second and get ready for sanding. Okay, we're ready to start sanding, and I've got a 3-inch disc sandpaper here, and I'm going to be sanding on here, but I want to hit this at an angle, so my handle's down and it comes this way. If I come in here like this, you can see what's going to happen. It's going to tear up, all right? Rip my disc off, so I have to maintain a little bit of an angle right here. And this is kind of different from normal sanding. Normal sanding, I usually sand with a lower RPM, but not this time. We're going to sand at the same RPM as what we was turning, because I don't want that sander getting too much air. But by dropping my handle like that, it just kind of sets it as it comes down to it. And I can tell you can see it. Can you see the grooves still in the field? I'm going to stay on those grooves until I get those covered out. We were talking earlier about that sandpaper wrapping around the corner. If you buy that oversized sandpaper, 3.5-inch disc, and then it'll wrap around and you can use it on a 3-inch disc. And it works just fine. I'm going to stop it here just a second. Probably hear me better without my mask down anyway. But you can see I've got quite a little bit of tear out in a couple of places here. So rather than trying to do that with it turning, I'm going to lock my headstock in position right here and then just turn it around. I'm going to turn it and get the other side without it running. So I'm going to leave the lock. But you can see that tear out right in here. Turn it back on and do it again. I've got 80 grit on here right now. I'm going to change the sandpaper, so we'll go ahead and pause this. So we did a little more sanding off camera, and it's time now to take it off and discuss what we did. So some of the college courses I had, the professor says, well, when you're teaching somebody to do something, you tell them what you're going to do, then you show them what you did, and then you tell them what you did. So we're back to that point. So we wanted to create a diamond on the side, and I think we've achieved that. As I was turning, there was a little bit of bark kind of pulled off of the edge. It really didn't come off, but it fuzzed up. So I took my sander and kind of cleaned up the corners of it on all 4 corners. We decided to leave a natural edge bark on the top. I kind of like that. And the other one we had here didn't have, and I kind of liked it too. But needless to say. Now, on finishing, this is very, very wet wood, and you can't see it, but I'm wet from the wood throwing water at me as I was turning. So you would probably want to just set this on a shelf somewhere. You could take it and put it in a brown paper sack with some of these chips that we've got laying around here in there with it, and just set it up and let it dry for 60 days or something. Take it down and it would be dry. The brown sack will act like the bark, and it'll let that moisture out of the wood real slow and easy. You could just set it out here and let it change shapes and do what it wants to. Since we left the pith in it, and it's kind of hard to see it, but it's just below the center right there. It comes out below the center on this side. Chances are if we did nothing, it might crack a little bit at that pith. So we would kind of want to take care of that. I don't think I'd put any finish on it right now until it had time to dry. With this natural edge bark on here, you want to be kind of careful about what you choose to put on it as a finish. If you put something bright and shiny, your bark's going to look really weird. So I would say more of a satin or a low gloss finish on it of some kind. Probably oils and waxes is out of the question. You wouldn't want to do that. So again, to review, we cut a little mortise that would fit on here, and then kind of just sanded it with it running for the biggest part. Stopped it and got rid of some tool marks that it was hard to do, and that's kind of where we're at. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and be safe, all right?